All right. So other things. These are the kind of the big three that people look at. Though number 4 is still pretty big. Translation rights. Translation rights. Very difficult to sell in foreign markets without an agent handling it. The big agencies will all have deals with foreign agents, and they will sub-license your books for you in foreign markets. I'm in like 24 or something. Early in your writing career, this is a really big deal because early in your writing career, usually, unless your book goes to auction, we'll talk about that, and it sells for a ton, usually your initial contract is going to be such that it's a little bit hard to make ends meet with it. Like even if you get, let's say you get a really good contract and it's like 60 grand for your book, which is a pretty solid amount of money. That's usually going to be half on signing, 1/4 on acceptance of the manuscript, and 1/4 on publication. So that's $30,000 your first year, $15,000 the next year, and $15,000 the next year. Okay? That, I'm sure, to some of you, because when I was first getting this, that sounded like a ton of money. Because I was working for like $8 an hour, and I'm like, wow. But that's a 60 for a first book is actually a really solid deal. Most of them are going to be different than that. I got 10. Okay, 5 on signing, $2,500 on acceptance, $2,500 on publication. It was the Lantris and Mistborn. So it was actually 20 on signing. Or no, it was 10 on signing because I got half for the contract, and then the rest was strung out across the next few books. So surviving then on basically 10, 2,500, 2,500, 2,500, 2,500. That's not very much money, even if you're a single dude living in your friend's basement, as I was. The 10 sounded fine. After that, it got a little sketchy. However, a lot of these translation rights can be decently lucrative. I think initially, my agent then took it and sold like Spanish rights, and that was like $1,500, and then sold Russian rights, and that was $1,500, and then sold like German rights, and that was actually like $2,500, and things like this. And most of these are paying out either half on signing, half on publication, or just all on signing. And so you get a dozen of these, and they each pay you $500, and you're doing all right suddenly. And if you're in the $60,000 range, suddenly they're, instead of paying you $500 on signing, suddenly you're getting like $1,500 to $2,000. And so you can see, particularly early on, these translation rights can really mean a pretty big chunk of change comparatively to your American rights, and can keep you afloat. Yes?
How do they compare next to the 50% that the agent's taking out?
Usually foreign rights are 20%. 10% to your U.S. agent who handles making the contracts, and then 10% to the foreign agent who is negotiating with the publisher over there.
How does this work if a book exceeds expectations? Isn't that the advance where you're at?
Yeah, this is all advance.
Okay.
Oh, you gave them to me. I should be throwing these away. Oh, yeah, you want one? Okay, go ahead.
Is it possible to sell foreign rights before you sell your book in the U.S.?
Yes. It happens very rarely, but it does happen. The biggest, I think, recently they did it with Stephen Erickson, who I believe is Canadian and sold in the U.K. first. And that happens decently often, that you sell in you can sell in the UK first. I wouldn't say it's by any means the norm, but it can happen.
How often do books out-earn their advance?
Usually, what a book is trying to do is that an advance should be about what the book is going to earn in its first 3 years or so. Basically, it's hardcover run and it's paperback run. If the book gets picked up and becomes a perennial earner, then you'll start earning royalties. Which, if you launch a career, you probably should be doing. With a new author, unless you go to auction, it's always going to be lower than what they think the book will actually earn, because you don't have any real bargaining ground. And so 10,000 for Elantris was really the bottom end. No one thought Elantris was only going to earn 10,000. It's possible that it would, because that's kind of like the lowest books that Tor offers that kind of do only, not a flop, but this doesn't do so well, that's probably not going to be in print in 5 years. That 10,000 would be about probably what that book earns. And so that's what they could offer. They actually offered me 5, and Joshua said, no. And I had no idea, and he got it up to 10 for 2 instead of 5 for 1. But most books by, oh boy, we're going to talk about earning out. This is a, let's put this one over here, and I'll talk about it if we have time after agents. Okay, so I don't forget. I'm not going to use, let's put a pin in that, but that's what we're doing. Okay, we don't want to go back to agents, all right? So, each of these things are advances against royalties. And things do earn out, particularly if they become a phenomenon. Or if, for some reason, it goes to auction. Dan famously sold Serial Killer for like $7,500 in the States and $90,000 in Germany.
Wow.
Because the Germans latched onto it, loved it, and there was big argument, a bidding war over who wanted it. What he wrote sells really well in Germany, and so his German sale was 10 times or more than his U.S. sale. That happens. Okay, so foreign markets. Just so you know, and if you have any angle, you can work with some of these. The biggest, by far, is what we call North American. It's everything you would assume it includes, plus the Philippines. For whatever random reason. Because the Philippines used to be a U.S. protectorate or whatever it was, and so he got grandfathered in North American English rights. Okay? Second biggest is what we call World English. World English is selling the book in English anywhere else. Basically, this is going to mean the UK and Australia, but also India. Could be a fairly big thing, but also any English language bookstore in Europe is being supplied by the World English rights holder, which is usually the UK publisher. So if you go to Amsterdam, there's a nice English language bookstore right on the dam, and it's all the UK editions. They did have some American editions, but it's mostly just the UK editions. So that's pretty big. Next in line, and these two can actually flop as you have seen, is German. Germans love books. They read a lot, and it's a huge market for books. So if you served a mission in Germany, that might be an angle you can work. After that, there's another group of them that are decent without being enormous. And these include French can be good. Japanese. Chinese, which comes in both simplified, and complex. Usually rights for Taiwan are separate from rights from mainland, and that's kind of how they go down, because mainland uses simplified and Taiwan uses complex, but Hong Kong also uses complex, as I understand. So it gets kind of sticky in the Chinese rights. Who else can be big? Spanish are tiny. Sorry. Those of you who serve Spanish-speaking missions, people in South America don't really read science fiction, fantasy. Don't really read a lot. It's a really tiny market. Yes?
So these are all in order of science fiction?
science fiction. I don't know a lot for other markets. But this is basically for fantasy, is how I'm doing it. The thing is, fantasy is one of the best-selling worldwide markets. If you guys watch movies, if you pay attention, you'll see that a fantasy film that flops in the States will often do still fantastically overseas and will often save the fantasy film. Fantasy, this is one of the places where we dominate, is for some reason, fantasy novels do translate very well. Whereas other things in the States do not always translate very well. And so, for instance, yeah, our foreign rights are very enviable to a lot of other genres. Science fiction, by the way, sells really well in Japan. Fantasy does not. Fantasy does okay. So if you're writing science fiction, Japan moves way up on this list. Those are ones to be aware of. I think everything else. I mean, there's another rung beneath this. Spanish can be okay, because I really love my Spanish publisher in Spain, but Spain is one of the poorer countries in Europe, and less discretionary income, less books being sold. It's not the best market. Scandinavian. The thing about Scandinavians is they all read in English, and so while there are a ton of readers, selling rights in something like Norwegian and stuff can be really tough because they just all read in English and they do a really good job of it. And so, selling anything, any of the Scandinavian, same as basically I found goes for Dutch. And so, yeah, Thai rights could go in here. You can usually sell as Russian. Anyway, there's a whole pile of them over in here. That even if you're a very big author, the deal is for $1,000.
Who translates them? And what role do you have in that?
The publisher, foreign publisher, pays for the translating, and usually when they're on the ball, they will send you emails to ask questions, and you can get back to them for the translation.
I know they sometimes change the covers too. Have you ever had any weird issues with that?
No, because they basically are going to do what they want to do, and it would be too hard for me to say no. I know the U.S. fantasy market really well. I can say what a bad cover is here. I can't say what a bad cover in Turkey is, because I don't know what works for that culture. So all of my Japanese ones are all manga style, the covers. Which they're interesting to look at, but I'm like, huh? Elantris was even illustrated. It had like 10 illustrations, all of manga-style illustrations.
Do they send you copies of all the books?
They're supposed to. They don't always, but they're supposed to. So, yeah.
So if you were going to do this yourself, you'd have to contact a foreign publisher, and
yes.
And I'm guessing they have someone that speaks English and all that.
Yeah, usually because they're going to be doing things in translation, but they read and write it better. I don't know of anybody who does this themselves. The authors that do their own just don't sell foreign rights, usually. Or the big author I know that does his own is Lee Modesitt, who was an attorney and a lobbyist and really shrewd contract negotiator, has an agent for foreign rights, only does his English language himself. So even if you go your own route, doing this on your own is really tough. So good luck. I'm sure there's someone out there who does it. But you basically have to go to London Book Fair and probably Frankfurt Book Fair every year and be meeting the publishers, because that's where they meet. Probably going to the one in Taiwan every year too, or Japan. So the amount of money you would put into flying to meet all these people would negate what you'd earn, which is why people just don't do it if they handle it themselves. Okay?